Welcome back to Careers and Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Laura. Today's guest has worn a lot of hats in the business of keeping people safe. Air Force intelligence officer, frontline analyst with 3 deployments, startup builder, Harvard leader, and a senior voice in government. You might know Lauren Zabierek as the former executive director of the Cyber Project at Harvard's Belfer Center, or as co-founder of Share the Mic in Cyber, the movement that gave a bigger platform to Black cybersecurity leaders and pushed the whole field forward. At the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, she co-led the National Secure by Design initiative, which is the idea that software should ship safer out of the box, just like cars ship with seatbelts. Lauren's now taking that work forward as Senior Vice President for the Future of Digital Security at the Institute for Security and Technology. We're going to talk about what secure by default really means, why equity work is security work, and how her journey has shaped the way that she leads. So grab your coffee and let's get into it. Lauren, I'm so glad you're here. It's so good to see you.
You too, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So of course we have to start with the obvious. This is careers and coffee talk. So are you prepared with your coffee today?
I am prepared. I am drinking all the coffee today.
And what is that a special mug? Do you want to share with us?
This is a special mug. So I got this mug at the zoo station at the Las Vegas Sphere. So
Nice.
U2 is my absolute favorite band of all
Of
time.
course.
And this time, this was my fifth time seeing them. And
Nice.
this time, of course, like told my husband, we have to get to the front row, have to.
Yes.
And we basically did. So like Bono and like Adam Clayton, they were like right there. It was amazing. And it was such a good show too. So I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with Octung Baby, which that's the majority of what they played. That album is from
Okay.
1993, I believe.
Okay.
And I just think it's still such an incredible album, and the whole show was just fantastic. I mean, the Sphere too, just the lights and the music and the video, and it just like
Like a whole
surround.
experience.
Oh, it was such an experience.
Yeah.
So yes, this
Amazing.
is I love music. You can see I'm wearing my Taylor Swift shirt today. Happy
It's a special
Showgirl Day.
day. That's
Yes.
right. At the time of our recording, I can't wait. I haven't listened yet, but I'm so excited.
I know.
I'm
It's
a
like I'm
Swiftie
letting it,
myself.
yeah, I'm like letting it just kind of sit there. I'm waiting to truly dive into it. So
Oh,
yeah,
I
so
love
it's
it. I
good to
wish
be
I
here.
we could have been like twinning today. I could have worn my Taylor, but that's okay next time.
I wish my orange cardigan came in time. I ordered it, but I think they're all coming this weekend. So I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. You have something to look forward to.
exactly.
I love it. Well, I have another fun question to ask you too.
Okay.
So I like to go like way back to the beginning, actually before the beginning.
Okay.
When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a fashion designer.
I love it.
I
Did you have one of those like drawing kit things where you can like draw the outfits? I think I had one of those.
I don't know if I had that. I know I drew a lot, but what I also did was my room was just covered in magazine tear
Mm,
outs. So
okay.
imagine this, right? In the 90s, fashion was, I mean, God, culture, right? Between music and fashion. All of a
It was
sudden
a
there was just,
time.
it was such a time. TV, movies, My So-Called Life still
Oh my
holds up, I
gosh,
think.
yeah.
Clueless, right? And so like the magazines were just like this thick, right? And I would just like study them and I would tear them out and I would just put them all along my wall. So that was what I had sort of envisioned in my mind,
Right.
although I didn't necessarily see a path forward in that. I just knew that I loved it.
You just loved it. Yeah, maybe we can find some future project for you in that.
Let's hope.
I love
Actually,
it.
to that end, there's a school of fashion design in Boston that I have been secretly planning to attend for several years now. I haven't made the commitment yet, but someday I will.
Yeah. Stay tuned. I love
Yeah.
it. Oh, that's such a fun answer. And obviously somewhere along the way things shifted a little bit, right? You ended up
Yes.
choosing service, national security. You have called national security about keeping citizens safe. When did
Yes.
that click for you?
Well, as I look back on my career, I think the thread that I see now, 22 years into it, is that ultimately security is about surviving and thriving. And
Hmm.
that is both from my perspective as a practitioner and as a human, and
Sure.
especially as a mother.
Yeah.
Right. And humans in this country and across the world, we all have certain needs, right, for surviving and thriving. And I think that traditionally, the way we've viewed national security doesn't really take all of those aspects into account. And so,
Hmm.
one of the things that I've been focusing on this year is this idea of redefining national security, because I think there's so much we could do better to help people to, again, not only to survive as well as thrive.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. You did quite a lot of work in intel
Hmm.
analysis. Three war zone deployments, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about that.
Well, can't tell you all the things, obviously, but
Because you'd have to kill us,
um,
right?
yes, I don't want to.
Something like
No,
that.
I, okay, so if we back up, this was during a time as a civilian intelligence
Hmm.
analyst. So every deployment that I did on my own accord. Not that I got myself out there. I just mean
Sure.
I wanted to go. I volunteered. Now the
Yeah.
reason that I did this was, and I've talked about this a lot, but my little brother was an Army Ranger. He was killed in action in Afghanistan in 2010, and so as the big sister, the eldest daughter, um, I just felt this sense of service and mission to
Hmm.
sort of pick up his mantle and, of course, fight for him. And so, um, you know, I kind of switched offices and really immersed myself in this novel intelligence methodology and getting
Hmm.
myself out there to continue the fight. And so, yeah, to your point, it was intense. I always say it was kind of the some really interesting, surreal experiences. I'll just say I remember one of the first images I have in my head when I think back at that time, and I don't know about you, but as I get older, it's like these memories are starting to fade, and
Yeah.
I'm really worried about that, and I want to find some way to really capture that. We can talk about this later, but I actually wrote a television script to try to capture that moment in history. So we can get into that later, but
Yeah.
I just remember one of the first mornings of my very first deployment, the unit that I was with went running, and I was like, yeah, I want to come running. And I just
Sure.
remember being like, oh my God, I'm finally here. I made it.
Yeah.
And I just knew it was life changing and um hard in many different ways, emotionally, physically, etc. But ultimately, it was definitely a transformation, I would say.
Yeah. That's amazing. How do you think being a part of a Gold Star family, and thank you so much for your brother's service. I'm gonna get choked up just saying it.
Thank
Oh my gosh.
you.
Um, how do you think that has shaped your mission and your urgency in this work?
Yeah, I have suffered loss as a
Yeah.
result of, our national security policies, right?
Yeah.
And I also look back. So when I started in Air Force ROTC
Hmm.
in the late 90s,
Hmm.
and that was, before 9/11 had happened. But that September 11th happened when I had gotten back from our boot camp. I
Hmm.
put that in quotes. And that event, because I don't know anyone personally, or I didn't know anyone personally who was lost in those attacks, but my dad was a pilot and he often flew the Boston to LA route on American
Mm,
Airlines. He was a captain.
yeah,
So just, by a scheduling, you know,
it hits
a
home.
change, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then ultimately I had met and become friends with the one of the pilots that did ultimately perish. So that I think was that early on, so many of our generation that really drove
Hmm.
us into national security. And like I said, I had already been in Air Force ROTC. I thought about being a pilot, loved, love airplanes.
Yeah.
But that's when I changed to intelligence, right? I thought that's maybe where I can have the most impact in this chosen career field. So there was that. I don't often mention this, but also my now husband, when we were dating, he also lost his brother in Iraq.
Oh
So
gosh. Wow.
so it's kind of like we're a double gold star family.
Yeah.
And so again, just to and then I've had friends who I've lost and friends of friends, and so from that aspect, there's just been a lot of loss and sacrifice. And I know everyone, sort of experiences that in their own way, but I think there's a part of me that is just like, if there are things that we can do, right, to ensure that less lives are lost and more lives can be enriched and saved, that
Yeah.
to me is really important. So, you mentioned that, and yeah, it's definitely, I think, ingrained in my personal mission,
Hmm.
and sometimes I have to kind of like pull it back and think of that, but yeah, it definitely stems from personal loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all have reasons that we're called to serve, and I think that's absolutely an admirable one.
Thank you.
Um, Lauren, you became a subject matter expert in activity-based intelligence at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency.
Hmm.
For our listeners, can you explain activity-based intelligence in really simple terms, and then also how it's shaped the way that you think about threats today?
Activity-based intelligence was at the time a novel methodology. So think about in the early 2000s, think about where we were in terms of data, right? So this is
Hmm.
before the iPhone comes out, right? It's before
Right.
everyone's on social media and uploading just terabytes of data every day, right? And so, how do you then transition from sort of a Cold War intelligence mindset, right? When you have very limited assets, we'll say,
Hmm.
to essentially monitor and to then report on that for policymakers. The mission change, right? When you're in a counterterrorism construct, right? It's no longer just being able to monitor for nation state threats, right? You then have to be like, okay, how do we identify, prevent, disrupt, et cetera, these terrorist, groups and plots and things like that? It takes a
Yeah.
very different intelligence, analytic mindset and methodology. So it was really novel and really interesting the way that instead of using sort of those limited assets, like how do you use all kinds of data, whether it was no matter when it was collected or how it was collected, what are the inherent strengths and weaknesses of that? How do you put
Hmm.
together a pattern of life, for instance? And so it was just, from a technical perspective, very, very interesting the way that the original pioneers, really kind of went at that. And especially, again, in a very limited data environment back then. And some friends of mine actually wrote a textbook on it. And I cannot remember the exact name of the textbook, but it's by Pat Bilchin and Steve Ryan. It's basically
Okay.
this textbook on activity-based intelligence and the principles and applications of it. So I have my own copy somewhere. It's dog-eared. It's all
Oh yeah.
annotated, and they signed it because just as a nerd, right? I love to just kind of read all about that and remember and apply, I guess, those lessons. But also too, if you're sort of interested in the evolution of it and why and how, I think General Stanley McChrystal's book called My Share of the Task actually does
Hmm.
a pretty good job of explaining essentially you have the way to operationalize and collaborate and a team of teams essentially.
Yeah,
So yeah,
sure. Yeah, good book recommendations. We'll get them added to the book club
thank
and we'll
you.
track down the textbook too so we can add
Yes.
that. You've had a really interesting path. We talked a little bit about your work in the Intel community. You've been at a cyber intel or cyber threat intel startup, CISA, the Cybersecurity
Mhm.
and Infrastructure Security Agency. By the way, there's got to be a way to streamline that
I
acronym
know.
a bit better.
Remember how Jen always, our former director, Jenny Sterling, would say, where security is so important, it's in our name twice.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
What would you say is the common thread that's run through all of those different places, all of the different places that you've been for you?
For better or for worse. And I say that because sometimes it's
Oh
just,
boy.
it's hard to get over is this fact that, I always feel like I need to have this mission to work
hmm
toward something
hmm
greater than myself and
Sure.
for a purpose and to make change, especially, in the national security construct. So I,
Yeah.
I wish I was someone, and I don't say this disparagingly to anyone who, takes a job that pays them
Doesn't
a
feel
lot of
that.
money, right? I wish I could be someone that's like, yeah, like I'll just,
We all have a different path, Lauren.
like I need to feel something
Yeah.
when in my career. So I would say that element, and of course, my role in CISA was my third stint in government between
Mm,
the military, between
right.
the intelligence community and then so public service has also been that cornerstone of my career too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I imagine the pace and, the pressure of working in the intel world and even, in government at times
Yeah.
leaves its mark, right? In public service. Are there practices or ways of thinking from that time that you really lean on today?
I think that the idea of, you know, in this, coming from early days of DHS, right? You see
Mm-hmm.
something, you say something, you do
Mm-hmm.
something, that you have agency, right, to address certain problems, that there's an urgency to some problems. And then for others, there's sort of, I think, more strategic ways of getting at them. Maybe it just takes a little longer. Maybe it takes, some more collaboration. You're a leader, right? No, even if you're
Mm-hmm.
not in a management role.
Sure.
Um, and, I will say this too. As a woman growing up in national security,
Yeah.
um, some of the lessons that I've taken from that are, and this is, hard won lessons, I would say, is that we belong at the table. We need to be at the
Yeah.
table, right? The table needs to have very diverse perspectives and voices. That is better for our national security. And then I think ultimately, too, and I always tell people, especially younger people, when they're young and they don't have families to take care of and other
Mm.
responsibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the things where you can roll up your sleeves and jump
For
in
sure.
and like, work a ton and just like work towards this mission. And then, because later on you're not going to be able to do that.
Right, right. It's not impossible, but it's so much harder. Kids complicate things, families complicate things. Um, I want to switch gears a little bit. I think it's still
Sure.
kind of on that same vein of like trying to find solutions and ways that, like you said, just really advance the public good. And that is secure by design.
Yeah.
Um, I hope you're excited to talk about this.
Of
So for
course I
some
am.
for someone who's never heard the term, what does secure by design mean? And then maybe give us like an easy to understand, like really simple real world example in a product that like most people these days use.
So I'll back up and I'll tell a story. So I
Yeah.
mentioned that my father was a pilot. He was a Navy pilot as well as an airline pilot. And this is something that he wanted to do since he was very young. And so that's, obviously flying and aircraft are very, something that I love as well.
Sure.
I've got my favorite, jets and things like that. Um, but so this summer, took my family to go to Seattle. My son really wanted to see Mount Rainier. He was really interested in volcanoes. But while
Nice.
we were there, we also went to the Museum of Flight. And at the Museum of Flight, there's this aircraft pavilion. It's outside. And it's got a ton of aircraft, like real aircraft, like 747s, a real Concorde, which was I've never seen a real Concorde before, and F-14s out there, right? It's just probably like 100 aircraft just packed in this area. And so I think it's very easy to kind of, you're just like enthralled looking at all this stuff. But what you might miss is this display, like all these placards below these aircraft that are part of the J. Kenneth Higgins Safety by Design exhibit.
Okay.
And what is so stark about this is really twofold. So, one, that flying used to be really unsafe, right? There are a
Mm.
lot of accidents and deaths and things like that. But now it's not. Now it's one of the safest modes of travel. It's no accident, pun intended, that it became the safest way to travel.
Sure.
And that's because we have systematically decided to study defects, to study crashes, to test
Hmm.
aircraft, to test procedures, to test pilots and things like that as a whole way to make aviation safer. And we did this with the automotive industry, we've done this with food and drug, right? So
Right.
why, where our entire society runs on software, is powered by software, right? From our critical infrastructure, and by that I mean water and power and our health, our hospitals, education, right? It's all
Hmm.
powered by software. Why do we not expect the same thing from our software? And so you see the result of that on safety in the myriad cyber attacks and incidents, right, that we've seen over the last what 10 years.
Hmm.
Now, the root of that unsafety, though, is not because we don't know how to do it. It's not because the companies are necessarily bad. It's just the incentives. They are acting rationally in a misaligned incentive system. So the market rewards speed to market and
Hmm.
features over security. So
Sure.
essentially, Secure by Design is about that. It's about how do we shift the incentives for software manufacturers to drive a behavior change to prioritize safety and security.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If you if you were to require one safety feature in every consumer device, software, whatever, what have you, tomorrow, start, you know what? Why wait till tomorrow? Start today. What would it be and why?
Multi-factor authentication. That is something that, so essentially, a password is something that you know. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, a lot of the passwords, people just sort of do like password 123 or whatever. There's a whole list of the most common passwords. So there's that. But then also, a lot of passwords, unfortunately, are stored in clear text in databases that are often breached. And then that's
Hmm.
sold on the dark web. So think of that, your username and your password as like the keys to your castle.
Yep.
Now, then think about if a cyber criminal or other actor has those keys to your castle, and then maybe you've used the same set of credentials across different accounts. Could they get into your banking, your social media, your
Yep.
email, etc., right? What multi-factor authentication does is to help to authenticate to the software that it is actually you. So you might have seen something like, hey, you've seen too many attempts on this. And I'm like, okay, I know someone else trying to get in.
Hmm.
Um, and it just gives you that control to say, yes, this is me, or no, this is not me, to deny that actor access to those accounts. So I would say that would be the one thing to do today.
Don't wait till tomorrow. Do it today.
Yes. But I will say, as far as from a secure by design perspective,
Sure.
you know, that was part of our pledge that we created
Hmm.
while at CISA back in 2024 is for the manufacturer, the software manufacturer, to enable MFA by default across their product lines.
Right.
So not just, we don't want to put the burden on the customer and say, oh, go into your settings and turn this
And
on.
change it. Sure. Because most people are
Exactly.
not going to do that.
Exactly.
I th
Yeah.
always think my I guess barometer, if you will, is like, would my parents do that, right? And like, no, they're gonna be like, multi who?
Yeah.
Do what?
Right. And right now, think about it, the burden of, the security responsibility falls to all of us. It falls
Hmm.
to, small and medium businesses. It falls to state and local governments, right? The most vulnerable and the least resourced, right? We shouldn't be expected to sort of go toe to toe with these particular actors, right?
Right.
That software should be, secure and safe out of the box.
Exactly. Yeah. So you mentioned, of course, you led secure by design efforts at within government at CISA. You're now pushing that from outside the walls of government, right? So my next question to you is what, as far as responsibility goes, right? Like what is the responsibility of government? What is government uniquely situated to do here? And then what is it that the industry has to really like own?
So history shows us what actually works
Hmm.
when when we want an industry to become safer. And again, we can look to things like the aviation and the automotive and the food and drug industries for
Hmm.
clues. I'll use now the automotive example.
Sure.
So, back in, let's see, the 50s and 60s, cars were built for speed and for style, but they were resulting in really catastrophic crashes. And so much
Hmm.
that so that, there were a lot of deaths, a lot of horrific injuries. And but at the time, the automakers really had no incentive to change their behavior.
Right.
Um, for instance, there was this one car called the Chevy Corvair, and you could go and a customer could go out and buy this thing called a camber compensator. You bolt it on after so that the car wouldn't flip over in the wind or swing or things like that, right? I mean, sound familiar? um, and so this man named Ralph Nader, who at the time was a young lawyer at Harvard Law, um, had started to study this epidemic, and
Hmm.
he wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed and concluded that it was really the design of the vehicle, called the designed in dangers of these vehicles, um, that actually resulted in, so much of those crashes and deaths and things like that. It wasn't just quote unquote the nut behind the wheel that,
Sure.
was often blamed, right? The how we blame the victims. Um, and so he testified in front of Congress, and then ultimately they created the National Highway Transportation Safety Act and the corresponding administration
Hmm.
to oversee this. Now, one thing that, or a couple things that NHTSA did over time was to, again, study defects in car and automobile parts. And I'm sure you get, right, recall letters, right? Oh,
Yep.
your airbag might be faulty. Please bring your car in. We'll fix it for free, because
Hmm.
when you collect information on those defects, then you can start to study them and then start to say, okay, we see this as a recurring defect at scale. This is something that we need to fix to keep our customers safe. They also study crash tests. They conduct and study crash tests to understand, again, like, okay, what are the ways that people can be harmed? So let's try to
Right.
design that out. And then also crash reports. So there's a really cool podcast called The 99% Invisible, and the episode itself was called The Nut Behind the Wheel. And it talks about this. It talks about how this man like wanted to go and do like ride-alongs with the police, not to see the crash site, but like to study the reports, right? What are the
Uh,
elements of data that go into the reports? So
mm-hmm.
again, that can go to researchers to show, okay, at scale, these are the ways that people are crashing and the ways that people are being harmed. How can we fix this, right? It's like the
Right.
whole industry is oriented towards this idea of safety. And then at the same time, what NHTSA does with this is to, again, study and provide analysis and then provide recommendations, not only to the automobile manufacturers, but also to states, right? So they can improve road safety and things like that. So
Yeah.
that is something that, uniquely suited to a government. Now, industry itself obviously can innovate within those guidelines, right? And a lot of what our work was at CISA was really pointed toward industry, right? Like here are ways we can drive adoption. Here are ways that you can work to take responsibility for customer security outcomes or
Yeah.
embrace radical transparency and accountability or lead from the top, right? So what are the ways that we
Mm-hmm.
can do this from a voluntary standpoint in industry? And then at the same time too, I would, put out a call to the insurance companies. So again, hearkening back to the automobile industry, let's look at, say, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, or IIHS. They're the ones that come together. They do a bunch of crash testing as well, and they are putting out their safety ratings, right? And so there's a real incentive for these insurance companies to want to try to lower the premiums and lower the rates, and thereby lowering, their payouts, because then, by reducing accidents, right? So
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
there's this incentive there that really doesn't exist, I think, yet in cyber. And so my call to action for the insurance companies would be like, let's look at IIHS. What can we do here? So there's a lot of roles for, or ways to get at this from a number of different aspects of the ecosystem. So government, industry, um, software companies, or sorry, customers, from enterprise, state and local, small business, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can really start to concentrate the demand signal to again shift those incentives for companies
Yeah.
to really focus on that. Um, Universities and coding programs can teach or require security education within computer science and educate engineering, such that the developers come out and they know how to code safely.
Yeah.
So increasing the supply there. So a lot of different roles and responsibilities.
It really is a team sport, I think.
It is. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, maybe it's a good time to get into share the mic in cyber. So
Okay, let's do it.
you you co-founded Share the Mic in Cyber. Tell me about that. What problem were you trying to solve?
So think back to 2020, right?
Hmm.
Pandemic is
Hmm.
raging,
I'd rather
and
not, honestly, think back
I
to
know.
2020. Can we just pretend that never happened?
Fair. Okay, so there was a time a few years ago, we were all in our houses, or in
Right.
our living areas, basically,
Yep.
and I think we were all paying attention to things a lot more.
Hmm.
And essentially, I remember this campaign. I saw it on Instagram, and it was share the mic, or share the mic now. And it was women, white women in politics and entertainment,
Okay.
who, stood up and said, I have a platform and I'm going to share it with Black women who, in these industries, who weren't getting the kind of recognition that they had been working, excuse me, years and years for. And so they wanted to share that. And I remember thinking, this could really work in cyber.
Hmm.
Um, and interestingly, I saw this woman, Camille Stewart Gloucester, then Camille Stewart, post on Twitter saying essentially the same thing. Oh my
Okay.
God, I never knew this woman at all. And so I think it was fate. I think it was serendipity. So I
Of
slid into
course,
her
yeah.
DMs and we just started chatting. And then within a couple of weeks, we had put together the first campaign and it was on social media. So if you remember back then, Twitter um, and so we basically got a lot of people in the cyber community who were very well known to share their platforms with Black practitioners in cybersecurity. And so we did 5 different campaigns. And I think at one point we had gotten over 100 million Twitter impressions.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
we got a lot of people to participate, which was really cool. Um, but then, I think I remember times changed. And so, there have been 2 sort of underlying principles and share them. And one of those is diversity is national security, but also we always evolve to meet the moment. And
Hmm.
so when things started to change, we thought, okay, what are the needs of the community right now?
Hmm.
And we looked at the policy area, and Camille actually had gone into the White House, and so we thought, you know, we put this together before she ultimately went in, but we decided to create a fellowship at New America. So really focused on bringing diverse voices in, expanding the tent, to really just underrepresented people in the community. Like come in and you have an idea, let's develop that idea and talk about policy recommendations. And so that's what we did. And it's, just the research and the work put out, I think thus far proves the
Yeah.
point, proves our
Yeah.
thesis that diversity is national security because of all these amazing analyses that maybe weren't being recognized or
Hmm.
paid attention to, and then the
Hmm.
recommendations that came out of it. So early on, talking about like an AI bill of materials, for instance, or the gendered impacts of cyber attacks, um, things like that. I'm forgetting. Oh, we had one I remember on the legal frameworks for civilian cybercore across
Okay.
different states. So a lot of really amazing things. So if readers are interested in that, check out New America and share the mic in cyber, and you can see all the different fellows we've had and all of their work.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think it shows you've been really intentional when it comes to like mentoring and opening doors for others in this field, which can be a little
You
bit exclusive.
Yeah.
And your work, it shows that, equity and inclusion aren't separate from security, right? They make teams better at their mission.
Yes.
Um, there are a lot of folks that are listening that may be in leadership roles or maybe they want to be. For those who want to build teams that are both truly diverse, and also highly effective, what is the most important advice that you would give?
I think the one thing I would say to this is related to my thoughts on national security overall,
Hmm.
and that is it's about the people, right?
Hmm.
We need to take care of our people so that they can accomplish the goals and the mission that we need. And so by taking care of people, it's again being responsive to the needs, right? Whether it's a mother who is maybe a few months out of maternity leave, but at 4 months, right, when most maternity leaves end, that's when the baby's
If
going through
that,
a sleep
yeah,
regression, if that,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Or someone who needs to take care of um a family member who might be
Hmm.
sick, or maybe your own health is
Hmm.
suffering. It's it really is about empowering people, making sure that they have what they need in order to accomplish the mission.
Yeah, it really is so important. And I think along those lines, it's really important to acknowledge that like we're not just people who work, like we're not just workers, we are whole people, right? Who have
Yeah,
lives outside of work and it's important to foster that and take care of your health and especially your mental health in order to be able to serve.
absolutely.
Like that old saying, you got to put your own oxygen, just to go back to like flying analogies, right? Like you've
Yes.
got to put your oxygen mask on first or you really can't take care of others. So I think that's so important, Lauren.
Yeah.
Um, as a fellow and advisor with Share the Mic and Cyber, what are you most excited about?
We do have a new evolution that is coming. I will just say that. So, um, yeah, we'll be putting out some more information very soon, but we're not going
Stay
anywhere. We're
tuned.
exactly stay tuned. Again, we are working to meet the needs of the moment. And so you'll see some information from us very soon. And if anyone's looking to support that, we'd love to hear from you.
And where can people stay tuned?
Yeah, we'll put it on LinkedIn. Also, it'll be on our website, which is just sharethemicandcyber.com. We'll,
Awesome.
put it out to different listservs, things like that.
Okay. So for all the high power TV executives and producers who are listening, do you want to pitch to them your script idea?
So I wrote this pilot about 5 years ago when I was on maternity leave. And I don't say that as
Okay.
like, oh, I'm this superwoman. It was my second child.
You
And
were up all night.
I was up all night and I thought it's literally now or never, right?
Right.
Like I knew that I was never going to have the creative capacity ever again
Sure.
to really explore this. Um, so yeah, the show itself was really based on my life, and also a love letter, I would say, to my best friends who, you know, were statistically right. We are either overseas or back in headquarters or a combination of all that. And so the experiences of being in, part of the mission and fighting the war while also still dealing with the things that we as women have to deal with. And so
Hmm.
I think there were very serious elements, there were very comedic elements.
Hmm.
I always like to tell the story of when I was transiting from one base to another, and I'd been up all night because this flight just kept getting pushed, push, push. Um, so I was on the plane and it was so hot in the middle of the day, and I just kept drinking water and I threw up everywhere. Not because not because it was particularly bumpy, but because I had had so much water to drink and because I was trying not to pass out from the heat. And
Oh my
of course
gosh.
the load master was just horrified and everyone around was like, what is wrong with you? And like here I am, they just sound like I'm dropped off like on the tarmac and like nobody's there to pick me up and I'm covered in my own water vomit. I'm like, what am I doing? Like
How
moments
did I
like
get
that.
here? Yeah.
How did I get here? Yeah, in TV shows where they're like, you might be wondering how I found myself here. Like so things like that, I thought would be really interesting to capture. But I think as time has gone on and as we've sort of looked back at, and watched what happened in Afghanistan a couple of years ago, I really, also want to weave in, the idea of, the perspective of Afghans and the sacrifices that they made, and what does it all mean, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm thinking about how do I evolve this story to be even more meaningful, and as much as like there are some, again, those hard and comedic but also really interesting moments, like how do I weave in that story as well? So yeah, if you have any listeners who have written a script or really
Well, yeah. Who do we know? Like Netflix, Hulu,
I know.
like who's
Exactly.
listening?
Yes.
I can't wait to check it
Yes.
out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's do a fun little lightning round here.
Okay.
Biggest cybersecurity myth you would love to erase forever.
Oh, that it's the victim's fault. right? That we clicked on a
Mm,
link and it's their fault, and they brought down this big organization. No, it's or that it's the sophistication of the villains, right? The
mm,
adversaries. Most times, they're exploiting very well known but also preventable weaknesses in
yeah.
software, right? Things that we know how to eliminate, but we just don't. So that is my biggest myth.
Well, on that note, one default setting, I guess, on top of MFA, because we've talked about that, one default setting that everyone should change today.
Hmm. Um, let's see. I really like a password manager. So it's not necessarily a
Mm,
default setting,
sure.
but a password manager to me just makes things easier when you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of new passwords. It fills in the fields automatically. You can, especially if on your phone, you can do face unlock and it just fills it in. And then if you're like, oh, I'm at a new site, it fills that in and it says, all right, what password do you want? It just automatically generates like this long random password and then saves it. In an encrypted database. So I think it just makes things easier.
Yeah. I like to think of a password manager. I'm obsessed with mine. Maybe because we're moms. I like one less thing to worry about or remember, like sign me up right now. But I think
Right.
of it as like a little treasure box, right? Like all you need is
Yes.
that key to get into the treasure box and like everything you need, all of your passwords that you don't have to remember, that are
Right.
long and strong and unique and all of that are in there. And you don't have to worry about it. You just lock it away and it's safe, you
Yes.
know?
Because as moms, right, our brains are on everything else, right? You're thinking about how do I do this sort of like policy recommendation? And then they're like,
Yeah.
oh, also, I just noticed my kids' pants are too short and I gotta order those, right? Like it's
Right. And
at the
like,
same
when
time.
is our next dentist appointment?
Yes.
And did I pay that bill? Yeah. Like, no, I need one less thing to worry about.
One less thing to worry about. Exactly. I am all about that.
All about it. Love it. Yeah. If you don't have a password manager, get one today. What are you waiting for? One book, podcast, account you recommend for people who are new to cyber.
Boy. Okay, I'm going to be a nerd. This is like for people who maybe they're sort of like, why all the cyber attacks? Like what is this? Okay. Geekonomics by David
Okay.
Rice. I think Bob Lord and I have single-handedly boosted this guy's sales of this book. This book was written in 2007. So Geekonomics, the real cost of insecure software. My copy again is totally dog-eared, it's annotated and signed by David Rice himself.
Very nice.
Yes, and it just talks about the incentives, right? And why software is built insecurely, again with a few exceptions. But interestingly, I mentioned it was written in 2007. Nothing has changed. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's still pretty current. And then also I really enjoyed this book called Fancy Bear Goes Fishing.
That's a good
Um,
one. That's
yeah,
a
you liked
really good
it?
one.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It explores the history of cyber incidents or cybersecurity through like five major incidents. So I think it's also quite interesting. So I would recommend those two.
We'll get that added
Yes,
to the book club page on careersandcoffeepod.com.
thank you. Can I
Um,
also offer a book
yes,
um,
absolutely.
that I really enjoy, not in the cyber realm, but for
Yeah.
especially for women in their careers? It's a book that I consult often, and I tell a lot of my mentees about it. And it's called Playing Big by Tara Moore, and that's
Okay.
Mohr.
Okay.
Her whole thesis is, how to use your voice in order to drive change in the world. Because obviously, many of us, there are a lot of things that we want to change in the world. So it's just all about that. I think it's really actionable and very practical.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to add that to my personal list too.
Yes.
Okay, one last one.
Okay.
Finish this sentence.
Oh boy.
Security by design will be real when blank.
Hmm. When we as a society finally decide that we want to be safe from cyber attacks.
I love it. Not
Yeah.
getting better than that. Thank you so much, Lauren. This is so fun. Any other resources, websites, places to follow your work that you'd like to share before we depart?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's Lauren Z 1010 is the URL. As we mentioned, I think at the top, I'm at the Institute for Security and Technology now, and that's securityandtechnology.org. Um, and yeah, I have a new Substack that I have started called Redefining National Security. And
Awesome.
that is, yeah, just this idea of like, how can we expand the lens and what are the things that we can do to make us more secure, that we can survive and that we can thrive.
Exactly. Lauren, I feel safer already with you at the helm of this work.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the great tips too. Hopefully, listeners will go stop, now that the podcast is done, or you could pause in between. You can go to your settings, set up your MFA, go get your password manager, go find one that you can feel safe using, download it at the App Store or whatever, and get it set up. It can be a little bit of a pain, right, to set up a password manager in the beginning, but once you get going, you're good. You're
Yeah,
good to
and
go.
Apple now has its own internal password
Oh,
manager, right?
yeah.
So you don't even
So
have
if
to
you're an
go.
Apple user, you don't have to worry about it.
You
Secure
don't
by
even have to.
design.
Exactly. Yes.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here, Lauren. It was super fun.
Thank you, Laura. I genuinely appreciate you having me on today.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Careers and Coffee Talk. Big thanks to our guest today for pouring out so many great insights. And hey, thanks to you for hanging out with us. If this episode gave you a little jolt of inspiration or made your day a little bit more brewed and balanced, be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming up next. Got a minute? Drop me a 5-star review. It's basically the podcast equivalent of buying me a fancy oat milk latte. Quick disclaimer though, the views expressed in this episode are personal and do not reflect those of any organization. This conversation is not an endorsement of any company, product, or service. It's just real talk over virtual coffee, okay? So until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and keep chasing the career that makes you feel the most alive. Catch you next time.